One OX prototype is part of Warsaken prototype series cards, which is known for having their resource costs entirely consist of power. It also has a hefty 2-turn timer, and it's a bomber type unit, with relatively low AT damage and 40 health. If we take a look at the other bomber units, we will notice that they have significantly higher attack values. Night Eagle has 160, Reaper 240 and V-Type 150. So, what makes this prototype card different? Like all bombers, 01X prototype has the bomb's mechanics, meaning it cannot damage any units and can only damage buildings, territories and leaders. So far this unit looks weak, but it has two unique mechanics that are extremely powerful and make it rather annoying to deal with. First one is the cloak mechanic, which says it can be blocked if this has covered. And then the covered mechanics, which says enemies can't specify this. Now what is important to know about Warsaken mechanics is that when you attack cards, units, or assign targets for effect cards like inter cards, you specify the target. This means 101X prototype is essentially untargetable by your opponent as long as it has the covered mechanic. If we go to the Warsaken.com rules and standards section and read, covered mechanic says enemies can specify this. Text rule. Cards with this mechanic prevented from being specified, which means that a card mechanic or rule that uses one specific in a description can apply to cards with this mechanic. And as mentioned earlier, attackers are also specified. However, it's worth mentioning that blockers are assigned, so meaning this card, as long as it doesn't have the cloak mechanic, which is mentioned here, that prevents blocking, it can be blocked by any unit that is A unit or anti-air and able to block A units. Meaning without these two abilities, the 010X prototype is extremely vulnerable. However, there's currently only one card that removes the covered mechanic. And it's called Amplified Uplink Facility, and it's a building card. It has an asterisk ability that says, if you have the most intel, enemy legions lose cover. This is where inter-warfare comes into play. Warsaken has a mechanic called inter. Warriors cards increase and decrease it. Let's say I have 6 intel and my opponent has 0. They would be unable to use inter cards, which is the normal use of this ability. However, this card, Amplified Uplink Facility, only says that you have to have most intel so that your opponent loses cover. Means that even if I have just 1 intel and my opponent has 0, and I have this Amplified Uplink Facility on my field, the 01X prototype will lose its covered mechanic and thus can be blocked by any force with ability to block air units. So, what we know about this card so far is that it's a bomber, unable to damage units. It has really low attack value, and it technically can't be blocked as long as you have more intel than your opponent. So it can persistently do tiny bits of damage to your opponent, but it's a really slow process considering it takes 2 turns for this card to be on the field. So overall, so far this card seems really weak, but this is when the combinations come into play. This card is one of the most powerful combo moves you can do in Warsaken during the set 1. If you go to card types and pick the VMD option here, there is one rather unique VMD at the bottom of the list called White Phosphorus Bomb. Now this card says, attach this to a specific bomber in your legion. If it damages an enemy territory, eliminate the soldier and army forces, then discard this card. Now notice that it eliminates all soldier and army forces. Even units that prevent damage by direct elimination cards like Pick Off or Deadman, which are mechanics, will be affected by this. So this card is essentially an anti-enemy field wipeout card, unless they of course have Navy and Air Forces. Normally, bomber units are fairly simple to deal with, just has something with stealth and anti-air capabilities, or bombers are usually pretty simple to deal with. While they do deal a lot of damage, as they are unable to damage units, just have a flying unit and means to remove stealth, or have the unit itself have stealth mechanics, and you can block even the Mighty Reaper with its massive 240 damage every single time. However, the 101X prototype is immune to air blocking and stealth mechanics as long as it has these two asterisks. Meaning that if you are playing the inter game and naturally are constantly having an inter lead, your opponent will be unable to utilize the earlier mentioned amplified uplink facility and remove the covered effect. This, on the other hand, means that the white phosphorus bomb will always fire. This means that for someone who wants to use 101X prototype, it's extremely important for them to maintain inter superiority and take out the amplified uplink facility as soon as possible. But if you are able to maintain that combination, you can just keep sucking these bombs every single turn and make certain that your opponent doesn't have any land forces available. This, on the other hand, allows you to entirely focus on air forces or navy forces as your supplementary forces, meaning that if your opponent started with a land heavy tech, they are even more of a disadvantage. This card, however, has plenty of weaknesses. As mentioned before, just one amplified uplink facility and 1 point of interlead will allow any unit, even non-stealth ones, to defend against it. Additionally, it has a power cost. And what this means is that there is another VMD card called EM Discard, which is fairly hefty to play, that allows your enemy to eliminate all air forces with a power cost. And as the prototype has power cost, despite its covered and cloak abilities, this VMD is able to eliminate it fairly easily. Additionally, 101X prototype has only 80 damage, which means it's extremely vulnerable for all the console type cards, such as the Southern Cabo Macada, which allows you to take control of a specific non-soldier force without stealth, less than 100 attack value, will be able to steal the force from you. And since they naturally have an interlead when they are doing this means you would in turn be unable to block the bomber. To remember though, that as long as the cloak and covered mechanics are on, it means that this card can be specified, so cards like Sergeant Cabo Macada would be unable to target it. So again, intel becomes extremely important. Let's sum up some strengths and weaknesses of this 101X prototype. It's a fairly expensive, slow to deploy card with low damage value and low health value that is unable to damage units. It, however, is essentially if you have an interlead and the opponent has no amplified uplink facility to remove the covered option of this card, entirely unblockable card that can do constant, steady, slow stream of damage to your opponent's territories or buildings. Combine this unblockability with the VMD white phosphorus bombs and this becomes an almost unstoppable combination that wipes out all land units, even those that are usually immune to elimination, except the ninjas if they have their own mechanics up which prevent VMTs affecting them. This makes these cards rather specific for intel decks that can maintain in the lead and want to get rid of land forces fast, or any land heavy decks that want to reduce their opponent's defense capabilities, as well as any navy or air heavy decks that just don't want to deal with land units and just want to add additional bombers. Besides that, this card is fairly expensive to play and slow to function and doesn't usually do significant amount of damage before the game ends. However, do remember that you can combine this with the usual suspects just as the carrier units. namely the A4 Revenge Super Carrier, which can attach any air units, so you could technically take 3 copies of this card from this one if you wanted to, but generally people would just prefer to take Reaper instead. Should you, however, go with power heavy deck and use the other prototypes and perhaps germs as well, the A1X prototype might be a nice supplementary force to add. Without the Phosphorus Bomb combination, though, I highly recommend it. It's by far the best use for this card. Additionally, as this card has no ability to block Dual Beam a Bomber, I do not recommend Fireforging it. There are very few situations where adding then hell to one Novax prototype would make it survive against usual blocker forces. So this is one of those cards that you, instead of Fireforging, would rather use the highest rarity version of it, which you have, making so that this card gives you the highest possible experience reward when you play the game. Overall, 101X prototype is a highly niche card that kinda demands you to build your entire deck around it to get the best out of it, and I wouldn't recommend you to use it until you master the game.